In this episode, we are going to hear from a prison guard who claims they're doing strange things with prisoners in the night. Then we venture to an old jailhouse in Tennessee that seems to have unwanted guests. But before we get into the stories, if you like listening to my content and still haven't subscribed, let me be the first to say, welcome aboard. Now let's get into the stories. Hi, Donovan. First off, love the show. I've been a subscriber for a few months now. This is going to sound a little crazy and a little far out there, but I believe they are taking prisoners and doing experiments on them. Well, some are having experiments done, but some just leave and never come back. I'm a prison guard for a maximum security prison. I have been for the last 8 years, and I'm still working here. Obviously, I'm not going to divulge the details of where I work. I would be fired or maybe even worse, like disappear like some of the inmates. I've been working the night shift for about 2 years now. I'm not sure if it's just my prison or all of them, but there are things going on at night that no one knows about. At least no one who works during the day. There are 2 or 4 inmates that disappear every month or so. They are in their cell at lockdown at night, and the next morning, they're gone. What I believe is happening is that they are being taken and experiments are being conducted on them. The reason I say this is there were a few inmates who came back, but they weren't the same. You could tell that they were different after they came back a few days later. The story for one of the inmates is that he got violent with one of the guards during lockdown, and they put him in the hole for 3 days. Now, I know this inmate well. We do get to know the inmates. He's not violent. Well, let's just say he's never shown any violence towards the guards, and has always been very compliant. His term was just about up, so why would you want to have any issues when your time is up? Anyways, he goes missing for 3 days, and some of the guards blame it on his behavior. And when he comes back, you can see it in his eyes. He's different. He's not walking the same way. He's not acting the same way. It's like his spirit was sucked out of him. There's been quite a few accounts of this happening over the years. However, most are just gone and never come back. That's the creepy part. Now I'm going to tell you a rumor that I heard from another guard. I cannot personally verify this myself, but I've known this guard for the last 5 years, and we hang out outside of work, so I trust what he says. He told me one night he was working transport duty, which is very odd to be doing at night. Almost all, and I mean all transports happen during the daylight hours. They must have been short a man because these weren't the regular guards who were part of the transport detail. He didn't recognize them. So they grabbed 3 prisoners who were on death row, and they had been on death row for many years. They put them in the back of a van and they go off. Their destination is about a 45-minute drive from the prison. At first, the inmates are asking what is going on and where are they going. The other guards just dismiss them and tell them to get into the van and they will soon find out. Everything is pretty quiet at first, then one of the other guards starts taunting the inmates saying, "Hopefully you boys got a good meal in. You're going to need all the energy you can get." He looks over at the other guard and they start laughing. At that point, my friend is confused because he doesn't know what's going on. This is his first time ever doing this type of detail. He then asks the other guards where this transport is going to. One guard replies, "The doghouse," and the other guard starts laughing. At this point, he's really confused, but thought it would be best not to ask any more questions. They get to the place and they open up the back of the van. The guards grab each inmate and pulls them out of the van. My friend is now completely puzzled because he doesn't know what's going on. He tells me that when they arrived at this facility, it was at least 10 miles into the woods. They drove on dirt roads for at least 20 minutes. When they get there, this facility has a very tall barbed wire fence surrounding it. They pass through this gate with multiple guards and drive up to this loading dock where they unload the prisoners. They take them into the building, And my friend said it looked like an arena where there was seating looking into the woods. And there were dozens of spotlights shining into the woods like a football stadium of some sort, but with only box seating. There were a group of other guards who took the inmates into custody, and then they left. On the way back, he starts grilling the other guards about what that place is and what is happening. They were reluctant to give out any information at first, but they ended up telling him that it's some type of feeding ground for creatures, like real-life monsters. They release the prisoners, and it's like a feeding frenzy for these monsters they have. One of the guards actually saw one of the events one time. What he saw is them release 3 men into the woods, and then a siren goes off, and then this big gate opens up. Once the gate opens, he just heard this loud beast running around, basically killing each man. He said it's hard to see anything from the ground. That's why they have the elevated seating. But he heard everything. I know it sounds crazy, but I believe him. I've known him for years, and he's a very honest person who would never make up something like this. I don't know if you've ever heard of this before, or if you have any idea what is going on in prisons at night, but I wanted to let you know about this. Take care and be safe out there. Hi, Donovan. I'm a police officer in the United States. I've been on the job for about 6 years now, and I've seen and heard a lot of crazy things. I don't know if you're interested in police stories, but this one is pretty wild. I was working the midnight shift at a very small town jail in Tennessee. We only have 3 cells, 2 for males and 1 for female. The building was an old house that had been remodeled to be a jail, so it was very open with no real privacy anywhere. There were 3 of us working that night, me, another male officer, and a female officer. At around 4:30 a.m., we started hearing strange noises coming from upstairs, like someone was walking around. We all looked at each other like, what is that? And we just kinda shrugged it off. Then we started hearing these banging noises coming from the ceiling, like someone was hitting it with something. We again looked at each other and I said, I'm going to go check this out. I walked upstairs and found nothing. No one's there. No reason for the noises. I went back down to my coworkers and told them that I didn't see anything, but that I would be checking around outside just to see. I checked around outside and found nothing, so I went back inside. As soon as I did, the banging started again, this time louder than before. My 2 coworkers were looking at me like, what do we do? I went to my car and got my flashlight and my sidearm. I walked upstairs to where the banging was coming from, and it was coming from behind a wall, so I couldn't see what it was making the noise, but I definitely could hear it. I shined my light around and I found nothing. No one was there. I went back downstairs to my coworkers and told them the same thing. I don't know what it is. Like someone had hit something very hard. We look at each other again and just say, what is going on? Then we hear another loud bang, this time louder than before. It sounded like it came from right outside the door, which is just an open hallway leading to the cells where the noises were coming from earlier. I opened up the door and shined my light around looking for whatever made that noise, when all of a sudden something grabbed me by my shoulder and pulled me into the hallway. I fell onto the ground and my flashlight flew out of my hand and broke. My sidearm was halfway down the hallway. I immediately turned over to see what grabbed me, and all I could see was this vapor dissipate into the air. I was so freaked out, I grabbed my flashlight and weapon and went back to where my coworkers were, and they immediately asked me what had happened. I explained to them that some unknown force was out in the hallway, and I saw it just disappear right before my eyes. It doesn't happen all the time, but every once in a while we still hear those noises. However, we don't go chasing after them anymore. I've been trying to capture some of these strange things that happen at our jail cell on camera. So far, I've had no luck, but if I do, I will surely send them in. I served in the military police in Iraq back in 2004. Every hour of every day was a game of Russian roulette. Improvised explosive devices would take out supply trucks that would try to escort over very dangerous roads. And there was no way of knowing where these explosives were except to just drive and hope that nobody's tires were on the wrong place at the wrong time. IEDs, they called them. Each time that I dodged death, it was the equivalent of making the right call of a coin toss. So needless to say, I was in a perpetually heightened state, running on what I would call Red Bull and pulling 18-hour shifts. When your senses are constantly in overdrive that much for that long, you don't always know if you can trust them. That's how your nerves get overdrawn and you're ripe for developing PTSD. I came back to the States with acute PTSD symptoms. But you know what? It wasn't because bullets were flying over my head, although that was a large part of the experience. See, Iraq is like one big acid trip. Ancient ruins in some shape or form are everywhere, and the locals treat them like they're no big deal. Stuff that was built closer to the time that Jesus walked the earth is irrelevant, spray-painted with stuff. All sorts of stuff, and 100 dialects you'll find over there. It was one such cluster of ruins, an ancient city that lost its place in the map, where bandits and ruffians alike set up camp and decided that me and my convoy were now a target practice. I manned the gunner's nest on top of the APC that I was in. I put my life in the hands of other men that I left at the steering wheel. This batch of men weren't backing down from the cannon I used to carve out slices of the ancient ruins they were hiding behind. A few of them, I think under the influence of something, came out into the open. Well, you don't just turn down an invitation like that. I was going to blast them down. When 3 or 4 towering shapes raced out of the ruins and mauled them to death. My eyes were telling me that I was looking at walking rabid dogs. My brain was telling me that this was impossible, but it wasn't my hallucinations that were butchering those bandits before my very eyes. They didn't stop to eat. They began leaping towards my convoy like large, furious dogs. And they struck me of terror that made my hand shake so much I almost couldn't aim or fire the APC's cannon. If you know anything about the stuff that goes on in Iraq, you might have heard of giants being discovered in the Iraqi mountains. Yes, I'm talking literal giants talked about in the days of Noah, in biblical stuff. That's well covered up. So I had heard stories of that from fellow soldiers here and there, but only took it with a grain of salt. I guess this area is keen, and when I say area, I mean all the Middle East, especially for its paranormal and weird stuff that goes on. So I guess I shouldn't be too surprised in hindsight, but these oversized dog creatures were just kind of shrugging the bullets off. 2 of them had succumbed to their injuries. The rest of what I saw, I realized that I could actually kill them, but they scattered. I took the whole thing as a sign that I was well overdue for rest. My turn to sleep finally came, but my problems didn't end there. Strange howls and weird noises spilled into the night. My men weren't sure what to make of it since they sounded like they were coming from wolves that were immensely sized. I didn't say a thing. Deep down, I had a hunch that we were being hunted. The ones that survived were not only real, but I'm sure they wanted revenge. I didn't know how I knew this. It was just an innate feeling, like the moments when my deepest intuitions had been right. I just knew a feeling that I was a marked man. I mean, I knew that terrorists and their sympathizers were going to lash out, but they didn't have the keen senses that allowed them to zero in like these beasts do, these rabid, humanoid wild dogs. Several nights passed where those otherworldly howls and growls were somewhere far away, but not too far, close enough to come calling if I ever fell asleep long enough. That awareness has wrecked me. I was discharged not long after for being deemed mentally unfit to continue my service. This has happened to many servicemen that never gets talked about. The howling even followed me home to Maine. How the things have tracked me across the ocean, I'll never know. Or maybe it's the sound haunting me. Maybe they aren't really flesh and blood, or only partly so. I don't know. Guns and barricades and iron bars are never far away enough anymore. It's the only way I could steal a few hours of sleep after spending hours of hearing my own heartbeat. It's probably going to give out before any of these demons come looking to make their killing blow. Thank you for listening to my story.